Hello everyone, it's Scott, and welcome to day 4 of Modern Horizons 3 spoilers. We got a lot of mythics and rares to talk about today, so let's dive in to Modern Horizons 3 spoilers. So first we've got Guide of Souls for a white mana. You get a human cleric, that's a 1/2, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and get 1 energy. So Soul Warden effect there with upside because you get the energy as well. And whenever you attack, you may pay 3 energy, and when you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters and a flying counter on target attacking creature. It becomes an angel in addition to its other types. So I think this is a great card. I think it's going to see definite play in Modern, and maybe one of the more impactful cards that we've seen so far from the set. Next, we've got Birthing Ritual. For 1 and a green mana, you get an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Then you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, you may put a creature card with mana value X or less from among those cards onto the battlefield, where X is 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana value. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a great card. Clearly, there's a reason it's at Mythic. I mean, this is Birthing Pod. And I think this is definitely going to see play in Modern because it's very, very powerful ability to be able to look at the top 7 cards, find one of them that you want, and then you get the option of sacrifice. It's not sacrifice and then see what you get. This is see what you get and then sacrifice. So I really like that ability here to just kind of dig for what you're looking for. And if when you find it, then you can sacrifice a creature. If you don't want something that you're pulling up in those 7 cards, then you don't have to sacrifice that creature. Next, we've got Roshin Roaring Prophet for 2, a red and a green mana. You get a legendary creature that's a giant shaman and is a 4/4. And when Roshan Roaring Prophet enters the battlefield, you get to mill 6 cards. You may put a card with X in its mana value from among them into your hand, and then you can tap it and reveal any number of cards with X in their mana value in your hand, and then add 2 colorless mana for each card revealed this way. Spend this mana only on costs that contain X. So potentially a very powerful card in Modern because we've got a lot of X spells, whether it's creatures or just spells in general. And I think this has got some playability because of that. Next, we've got Crab Animation for 4 and 2 black mana. You get a Crab Demon, that's a 5/5, and it has a merge from Artifact for 5 and 2 black mana. And when Crab Omation enters the battlefield, target opponent exiles the top card of their library, a card at random from their graveyard, and a card at random from their hand. You may cast a spell from among cards exiled this way without paying its mana cost. So I think this is a really kind of nice top end card, certainly in limited, where you're going to be able to take a card from your opponent's hand, you're going to take a card from their graveyard, and then you get the top card of their library, and then from among those you're going to get to cast one of them for free. And that's probably going to, in most situations, lead to you being able to cast a good card that your opponent has. Next, we have Necro Dominance for 3 black mana. You get a legendary enchantment, and you skip your draw step. And at the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life. If you do, draw that many cards. Your maximum hand size is 5. If a card or token would be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So an interesting card here where I can see this if you're playing a life gain deck and you can skip your draw step and then basically refill your hand every single turn by going ahead and paying some life to get the number of cards that you want. So you've got 5 constantly in hand that you're going to be able to play with. So I think there is potentially a place in Modern for this. Next, we've got Phyrexian Tower. It's a legendary land where you can add colorless mana, or you can sacrifice a creature and add 2 black mana. So interesting card that you can use it to sacrifice and get the 2 black mana. So I can see if you've got anything that can kind of untap your lands as you're going, that you can just kind of sacrifice creatures as you go and get as much black mana as you need. And I'm sure there's some kind of infinite combo probably with this, that you can just kind of create an infinite amount of black mana that you would need in a particular game. Next, we have Nadu, Winged Wisdom for 1, a green and a blue mana. You can legendary creature that's a bird wizard. It's a 3/4 with flying. And creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. This ability triggers only twice each turn. So I can see Nadu in a deck that you're going to be targeting your own creatures with abilities, and then you're going to get the upside of putting lands on the battlefield or drawing a card every time you do. So I think this is potentially a very, very powerful card in the right build in Modern. Next, we've got Toxic Deluge for 2 and a black mana. You get a sorcery, and as an additional cost to cast this spell, you can pay X life. All creatures get -X until end of turn. So I really like this as a board wipe because you can choose how much life you're going to put into this and then wipe out your opponent's board with the knowledge that you can kind of pay enough life to kind of knock out whatever you need to on their side. Hey, if they've got only some small creatures, you only need to do 2 toughness, you can do 2. But it has that flexibility to do 5 or 6 or whatever you need to clear the board of your opponent's creatures. Next, we've got Abstruse Appropriation for 2, a white and a black mana. You get an instant with Devoid. Exile target non-land permanent. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend colorless mana as though it were mana of any color to cast this spell. So this is a really interesting card in my mind, and I think it has modern playability because you can now exile one of the best cards your opponent has on the board, and then you can turn around and cast that card and you get to play it because it's in exile. And there's nothing your opponent can do about that because it's not something that it's not an enchantment or artifact that they can kill on the battlefield to get their card back. It's simply exiled, and you have the ability then later to cast that card. And I think that makes this playable in Modern in the right deck. Next, we've got Sowing Microspawn for 3 and a green mana. You get an Eldrazi Fungus. That's a 3/3. It is devoid, and it has a kicker for 1 and a colorless mana. You may pay the additional cost as you cast this spell. And when you cast the spell, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. When you cast the spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. So really nice ability there that you can go ahead and get a land for yourself when you cast this, but then also if you kick it, you can take out a land on your opponent's side. So I think there's some playability for this in Modern in the right kind of deck. Next, we've got Fanatic of Ronus for 1 and a green mana. You get a Snake Druid, that's a 1/4, and you can tap it to add green mana. It has Ferocious, and you can tap it and add 4 green mana, but you can only activate if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which probably isn't going to be a problem in this kind of deck. And it has Eternalize as well for 2 and 2 green mana. You can exile this card from your graveyard, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie Snake Druid with no mana cost, Eternalize only as a sorcery. So I think this definitely has modern playability in any deck where you're trying to go ahead and get big creatures onto the field and you need extra mana for that. Once you've got that first 4 power creature onto the battlefield, and there's plenty of those for 3 cost in green, then you can tack this and put another 4 mana into your mana pool and then go from there. So I think it's a card that we'll definitely see some play in Modern. Next, we've got Imsker Iron Eater for 6 and a black and a red mana. You legend a creature that's a demon and a 5/5. It has affinity for artifact, which means that it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. And when Imskir Iron Eater enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control rounded down. So when you cast this, you're going to go ahead and get some additional cards as well. So I really like that ability. And with this being an affinity card, it's probably going to cost you 3, maybe 4 mana max to cast this. And then you get the benefit of getting additional cards into your hand and having a 5/5 on the battlefield. And you can sacrifice an artifact, and Imskir deals damage equal to the sacrificed artifact's mana value to any target. So that's a really great ability that you can at any point basically sacrifice an artifact. So if you get a 5 mana cost artifact onto the battlefield, or some of the 6 and 7 ones we saw that had affinity from Modern Horizons 2. So I can see them, working together and resulting in you being able to quickly defeat your opponent. Next, we've got Recruiter of the Guard. For 2 and a white mana, you get a human soldier. That's a 1/1. And when Recruiter of the Guard enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with toughness 2 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So I've got mixed feelings about this card. 3 mana for a 1/1. Yes, you get to go search your library for a creature that has toughness 2 or less, but it doesn't immediately go onto the battlefield. But I think in the right build of a deck where you've got creatures that have high power but low toughness, one of those kind of creatures would be a good thing to go search up with Recruiter of the Guard. And I think if you can build the deck that way, then I think there's a place for Recruiter of the Guard. If you can't, then I really don't think it's worth the 3 mana that you're putting into it. Next, we've got Aether Revolt. So play back to the set Aether Revolt. For 2 and 2 red mana, you get an enchantment with Revolt, and as long as a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. Whenever you get 1 or more energy, Aether Revolt deals that much damage to any target. So clearly this is going to be something that you're going to be playing in an energy deck, and that ability to do damage to your opponent equal to the number of energy you're getting. And a lot of times it's 1, 2, sometimes 3 energy that you're going to be able to get, and because of that, that's going to help you finish off your opponent quickly. So I think there is a place for this in the right energy deck. All right, now we're moving on to Shifting Woodlands. It's a land. Shifting Woodlands enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. It has tap for green mana, and it has also Delirium, where for 2 and 2 green mana, Shifting Woodlands becomes a copy of target permanent card in your graveyard until the end of turn. Activate only if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. So if you have the requirements, I think this is an interesting land, because basically it allows you for that 4 mana to go ahead and copy any permanent card that you've got in your graveyard for that turn, and that could be the difference in winning and losing. So I see this being played as 1 of, maybe a 2 of in green decks for that Delirium ability. All right, those are the rares and mythics for today. We got a lot of them to talk about. I think there's some definitely interesting ones from the set. I think I really like that black board wipe, and I like the Guide of Soul. As 2 cards, I think will have an impact on Modern for sure. Tell me what you think in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for staying to the end of the video. And you can check out our past couple of days videos right now. Thanks. I'll see you next time.